Right. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today I'm starting a new series. In many ways, this is an old series that got interrupted. Just before COVID hit, I decided that I had to write a book. And that book was going to be about the ideas that people in the meetup had found extremely useful and useful in transforming their lives. And I called it 52 Living Ideas. That's what this whole meetup is named after. So the basic idea is that I would write up each of the ideas in as condensed a form as possible. I would use only 2 pages for each of the ideas, and then come up with questions that will enable people to apply the idea. And I was in the process of producing 52 such ideas, so a very short book, and that would serve as a way for me to scale up the meetups. Now, what happened was COVID hit before that. So I found, in this Discord and Zoom and online platform, a way of scaling up the meetups right away. And that's what I've been doing. But now that I have amazing series of meetups already set up with all kinds of friends, spearheading individual meetups, I have decided to kind of go back and start executing and finishing up the book. So this is the first in that series. Now, this meetup has a very different character than most of our meetups. Most of our meetups are exploratory meetups. It's to we try to take up large areas like Carl Jung or Stoicism, and we explore the area. This one is all about application or transformation of life. So I'm going to be focused like a laser beam on taking an idea and saying, okay, how do you actually use it in your life? It's going to be supported by text. So I have actually put the text up on the meetup page. It's very condensed, but I'm going to walk you through it. I want to show you, we're going to do some exercises about how to apply each of those ideas. So that's the plan. Okay, so it is application oriented. This is not about saying, oh, this person said that, or, this is all about saying, okay, today, for example, we are talking about writing. So this is all about your writing. This is all about understanding the idea that I'm presenting, making sure that you understand it clearly. If you see any problem with it, pointing it out, and then trying to do some exercises to see how it is applied. Again, raise questions based on that. So basically, applying of ideas is what this series is about. So today's idea is I call it loosely as analytical and, oh, thank you, Joe, for posting that. So you can go ahead and post the whole thing in the chat, so it remains as a reference. Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the history of this idea. I have a friend, Rob Trasinski, who actually did a meetup I recommend very highly on language over here. I interviewed him on that. I've known him for like 20, 25 years. And I have always been astonished by his productivity of writing. He produces pages and pages of material each day. And all of it is kind of complex thought, new observations, interesting historical things tied in, making side points that come roaring back and showing how the side point is not actually a side point. It's an amazing quality of writing. And the way he works is that, I go to his house for Thanksgiving, and, he would say, okay, I have to write my column. And I ask him, what are you going to write it about? He says, I don't know yet. And then he goes into his room, and in about 1.5 hours or 2 hours, he comes back and plunks something in front of me, which is like a 15-page kind of very thoughtful, new presentation on something that is really current. Um, so, so I asked him, this was about 10 years ago, how do you do this? What do you actually do? How do you manage to produce this stuff in this short a period of time? So his answer was, oh, I use this method, which I've been using for a long time. Um, and that's what this thing is about. And now I have been using it for at least 10 years or so. I write a lot every day, uh, partly in journals, but I write for work. I like write, marketing copy. I write op-eds, editorials. So I do considerable amount of writing per day. Um, and this is the technique that I've been using. So what I want to do is I want to describe the technique to you, and then we're going to actually do exercises so that you get the technique. Um, and then that's the plan. All right. Okay. So background. So first, the structure is very simple, and you can read it. Uh, you know, Joe has been kind enough to post it in the chat here. Is there on the meetup page. The first is to understand the problem, and second is to see the solution, understand the solution, and third is to actually practice the solution to see how it actually works. Okay, deal with any clarification, and then you can actually come back. This is a weekly series, so you can come back next week. I'm going to post the video on YouTube later today, so you can put your comments, questions on the YouTube video itself, and I will go ahead and answer it over there, and then we can come back, and we'll do that for each idea that we go through on these Sundays. All right, so the first point, I'm just going to read out what I wrote, and then we will elaborate on it. Our brain has two faculties, analytical and intuitive. And these two faculties operate differently. The analytical faculty is deliberate and rational. It is slow and very deliberate. It requires considerable amount of effort. Whereas the intuitive faculty is effortless, subconscious, automatic, and fast. And it has a flowing quality. By the way, this is really the core of work of Daniel Kahneman, System 1 and System 2. Each of these faculties can interfere and usually do interfere with each other if you try to use them together. You can get the maximum mileage out of them and out of your brain by respecting the nature of each of these faculties and shuttling between them so you can bring both of them to bear on a problem. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So I want to keep it very simple because this is all about um, this is all about just understanding the idea and then applying it. Because the thing that I want you to walk away with is is not, oh, that was an interesting meetup, but I got a tool that that I've added to my tool belt that is making my life more efficacious. Okay, that's what I'm trying to do. So it's very simple that you have the old faculty that we have is our emotional faculty, our intuitive faculty, which just naturally flows. We have a very large brain. It's mostly in terms of hemisphere, it's mostly the right brain and the back brain. So it's like back and right is where it operates mostly in the brain. It is very good at seeing patterns. It is very good at reacting to nuances. It is artistic in some way. Um, so that's one of the faculties, and that kind of naturally flows. And most people interrupt it. Most people do not have enough confidence in it. They second guess it. They stop it from doing what it is doing all the time. So it can't really operate much. Um, so that's the first faculty. This is the older faculty. The newer faculty is mostly kind of in the left brain and front. It is kind of the deliberative faculty, it is the rational faculty, it is the analytical faculty. It is a way of seeing structure of things. It is about applying objective standards to what you have done. That's the second faculty. That is very deliberate, effort intensive faculty. Okay, these are two very different things. The point I'm making is that if you want to use your brain well, then if you shuttle deliberately between, you have to accept the fact that you have these two faculties. And if you shuttle between them in a very deliberate, explicit way, then the throughput that you produce is much higher. Okay. So I'm going to work through just one example of writing. It's 8 steps. Okay. And then I'm going to go through and take questions about the process once I have gone ahead and presented it. And then once you understand it, once we understand what I'm saying, then we're going to actually do an exercise. So I can demonstrate to you how each of the steps work for some problem that you yourself choose. Okay, some writing tasks. So at some point, I'm going to ask you to get a pen and a paper or your computer out to ready to get to write. Okay, that's what we're going to do today. All right, so what is the process? How do you use both these faculties? So I'm going to just give you an example of my friend or myself writing a blog post or writing an editorial, for example, which I do all the time. And he writes, blog post all the time. So first one is, I'm assuming that you're writing a blog post. So first you ask the question, what interesting blog post can I write today? This is kind of saying I'm setting the purpose. In the context of my life, it is important for me to write a blog post. So I'm setting a purpose to write a blog post. This is a very deliberate action to get things started. The second one is that now you shift to the intuitive faculty and you let your subconscious, again, you can just read with me because I've spent a lot of time trying to write it up as best as I can. This is the first draft and I'm going to, improve it with your feedback. But the reason I've written it, so you can kind of follow it, because the crucial thing is that I want you to actually grok this idea. So what are you doing in the second step? The second step is you let your subconscious loose on this question, and it will produce a whole host of ideas of possible posts. So here what you're doing is that you're not critiquing the ideas. You're simply saying, what are the interesting things I can write today? Now that question could be different, that the starting question depends on your life. So for example, you can say, okay, what are my values? I'm going to write down what my values are. That could be the first step. The first step could be anything. It's all about setting a purpose, which makes sense for you, okay? The second one, you are letting your subconscious react to that question. Now, the important thing is that the more crisp the question is, the better your subconscious is going to perform. If you keep the question very vague, subconscious is going to have trouble producing stuff for you. The more clear you are, the better more clear you are in the analytical part, the more prolific you're going to be in your intuitive part. So what will typically happen is that a whole bunch of ideas will stream into your mind and you just jot them down. Okay, you just write them down. What you're doing is that it's like a core dump. It is like, it's a stream of consciousness. You're just writing things down. Maybe I can write this. 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 Or if it's your values, you can say, this is my value. This is my value. You're not trying to organize them. You're not trying to say, is it actually my value? That's not the function right now. You're just letting your intuitive faculty and the emotional faculty do its thing to put a bunch of things on the table. Okay, so that's the second step. The third step, now remember we are shuttling. The third step, the analytical step, is use certain standards to select between the post. For example, which one would be something interesting to my audience? Which one can be written in a reasonable time? etc. Using these analytical criteria, select a post. So what you're doing now is that you're applying all the standards that you know to whatever it is that your subconscious has produced. Okay, this is the time. It's like you're changing gears. Now, for some people, it takes time. So for example, after they produce something from their subconscious, they might want to go take a walk. Maybe they want to, grab a drink of water, or maybe take a deep breath, something like that. So something that separates the two stages. Um, some people require it. Over practice, the amount of time that you will need to switch is going to be lesser and lesser over time. So you get used to this process. Okay, so what you're doing is that you're applying all the standards to select one of the posts. So you can say, okay, this particular post is not significant enough. I'm not saying enough in it. This particular one is too complex. There are too many things that I will need to do. There is no way I'm ready to do all of that. So you can go ahead and use all the standards that you have to pick a post that you think is right. Okay, so that's step number 3. Then step number 4 is intuitive. Check how you feel about writing the post and see if it generates enthusiasm. Okay, now even after doing all that analytical thing, you still have to be motivated to do that. So you have to check in with your subconscious, because or your unconscious, whatever you want to call it. I'm using the word subconscious and unconscious interchangeably in this context. So you check in about how you're feeling. Are you excited about writing the post? Because you will need that. And if for example, if you are not enthusiastic enough, maybe you can go to your second best one from the analytical one and check with that as well. So you want to make sure that when you are kind of getting ready to say, okay, this is what I'm going to write, you think it's the right thing to do by all the standards that you know, and you're kind of enthused about it. You feel confident that you're going to be able to do something. Okay, so those are the first 4 steps, and at the end of which you're saying, this is what I'm going to write. Okay, next, so the next 4 steps. So next we're going to use the analytical faculty to produce a bullet point structure of the post. If necessary, 2 point. Forget about if necessary, 2 point. What I mean there is that sometimes, like if you're writing a book, or if you're writing a long essay, you might have like 1 level structure, and that may not be enough to start writing. So you might need a second level of bullets on each of the first level points, in order to make it easy for your next step. Okay, but let's take a smaller piece so you have just 1 level of bullets. Here there are questions, very simple questions, like where is the right place to begin? Where is the right place to end? Where do you need to end? Those are the most important questions about the structure, the beginning and the end. If you get, I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious, but if you get beginning and end right, you can put pretty much, you have a lot of flexibility in the middle. So you have to write, what should be the beginning and what should be the end, and then how are you going to execute the middle. So you put points in the middle. So I always, recommend starting with the beginning and the end first, and then figure out what's it, what needs to go in the middle, because that gives you a context to do that. But all of this is analytical work. Okay, so once you have done that, once you have a bullet point list, could be 1 level or two level, now you go to the intuitive faculty, your creative faculty, and just write freely on each of the bullets. Just write what comes naturally. Okay, our brains are very large, and they have enormous store of observations and connections, which we do not consciously know at a given time when we are actually sitting down to write. And so you have to respect that your brain has that potential, and you have to let it run freely. If you keep telling it, oh, you're doing things wrong, if you are at the stage of getting things out on the paper, if you are trying to be a critique, you're trying to say, oh, I must get it right the first time, anything like that, it is going to really freeze up your ability to understand, sorry, your ability to express yourself, your creative faculty, you're stunting it. Okay, so don't do that. Just write it out. Just write it out. Okay. So this is actually, this takes, so this is the main thing. This is, you've gotten everything on the paper. Okay. The next step, and this is where I strongly recommend taking a break after this, because you've just kind of poured out your heart on the paper. Okay. This is a good time to take a break. If it is a significant thing, you can sleep on it. If it is, and again, the amount of break that you need, kind of break that you will get better and better at making it shorter and more effective. But you have to kind of walk away from what you've done. And that's very important, because the next step, the analytical step, is look at the writing as if it was written by somebody else and edit it to make it tighter, more objective, and clear. Okay. The subconscious, the unconscious has tremendous assets, but kind of making the context of what it would look like from the other person is not a particular strength, unless that's the goal that you set it to. So here, that's not the goal that you set it to. You were just trying to get things on the paper. So now you're asking, if somebody was reading this, is this clear to them? Is this objective? Can this be made tighter? The way it flows, does it flow logically? So you're applying all the analytical standards that you have to what you have written. And you have to regard it as if it was written by somebody else. So you cannot get attached to what you have written at this stage, because that will impair it. You're just trying to make it clear, more objective, tighter, more logical. Okay, so that's all you're doing in this step. Okay. Now, once you've done that, you go back and look at the paragraphs and you rewrite the paragraphs to make them flow better. Because in the process of doing that, in the process of tightening it up, making it more objective, you would have lost something of a flow, the emotional impact, the kind of the element of surprise as you're going, all kinds of subtle points could be lost. So you're going back and rewriting it, just re-editing it to make it flow better, more naturally, with more emotional impact. Okay. And these steps 7 and 8, you repeat multiple times, as many times as you need, in order to make the piece better and better, until it sinks to your subconscious and is very convincing to your analytical faculty. Okay, so that's the overall process. So this is a way in which and it's very practical. It's like you can actually do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you just do a loop at the end, and then you're done. So that is the process that I've been using. That's the process my friend Rob uses. He has taught it to many, 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 many people, and it has worked really well for them. So that is the heart of what I want to do present. Now, what I want to do is I want to take questions, but these questions are again about, remain focused. Remember that this meetup is all about improving your writing. Okay, if your purpose is not improving your writing, please don't ask a question. You're welcome to listen. Okay, but if you're not trying to actually use the idea to do this, then that's not the audience that I'm targeting this to. Again, don't look at kind of ideas of other people. Use only, be confident in your own experience. Talk from your own experience. Bring up any problems that you see with it on your own. Bring up any problems that you see with your writing, and we'll deal with them in as much detail as is necessary, so that everything is clear before we go to the exercise phase. And we are going to actually do an exercise. So if you want to ask questions, you can go ahead and type in an exclamation mark, or type a question, or raise your hand in Zoom. Go ahead. So the core idea that, core theory that this is based on. Okay, Shelly, go ahead and you can ask. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, well, I was just wondering, it seems to me that when we write anything or really do anything, we have our own lens that we're looking through. So we can review it multiple times, but we're going to have the same lens, generally speaking. We might find grammatical errors or a better way to phrase something, but ultimately I find that having someone review and provide constructive feedback, and I don't know that I think you need 10 people to do that, but you certainly do need at least more than one person, I would think, to provide some kind of constructive feedback, who has an experience in this area, who's already been writing and has people providing constructive feedback to their own writing, right? So that was my thought behind my question.
Absolutely. Excellent question. And absolutely true. Absolutely true. The way I would present it is like, based on, there is one guy who has kind of applied Daniel Kahneman's ideas on a very large scale, and that is Ray Dalio. He wrote a book called Principles. Now, when you read Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, I always cheat. I read the conclusion first. And most people actually, I don't know, they read the book, but they miss this conclusion at the end, which I think is the biggest takeaway from it. The observation is very simple. What Daniel Kahneman points out is that your own, somebody else's system too, somebody else's analytical faculty is able to spot what is wrong with your system one much better than your own system two. So your own ability of doing all of this, I've said, there is like the intuitive faculty and analytical faculty. Your capability of your analytical faculty of finding problems with your intuitive faculty is much less than somebody else's analytical faculty. And they don't even have to be any particularly great person. Just the fact that they're different, they're going to notice some things that you're going to miss. And the phenomena that you're explaining is exactly the problem of writers, because they get caught up into something and they're not able to step back. All these things about kind of deliberately shifting between intuitive faculty and analytical faculty is all about trying to get as much distance as you possibly can from your own writing as possible. So kind of, it's like a cheap way of getting an editor. But for any kind of significant writing, if you can get other people's feedback, that is absolutely critical. So I'm a very big fan of feedback. Another way of looking at this whole process, this is all about producing something and getting feedback on it. And the more feedback that you get from more people, from more angles, the better. So absolutely, I agree with that. So a great point. So now it's going to be Michael and then Anne. Michael, go ahead.
Oh, that's me?
Yes, Michael, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't see if there was another Michael. Hi, so I'm just wondering, so this all makes sense if you're doing it from scratch, like steps 1 through 8. But I guess my curiosity is, if someone wants to write a blog post, for example, and they have a lot of notes on digital notes or extensive notes they've taken on the subject in the past on paper, how would you recommend, or any suggestions or considerations if you want to incorporate those past items into the freshness that you just created?
Right. So the way I would do it is I would use the same process, except the start would be slightly different. Okay, so first, what I would do is that you're setting yourself, because the first step is to set your writing goal, right? So what you would do here is that, like, suppose you have come to a conclusion that you have written, a bunch of journal entries, bunch of notes and stuff on a particular area, or you've written, let's say, on multiple areas. So the question is, given all of that, what is it that, take like a view, like a bird's eye view of everything that you have as a base, and say, okay, what topic. Okay, what interesting thing can I produce from it? What one piece can I produce from it? And what will happen? So that's the only question, you know. Just the question, instead of saying what interesting blog post I can write today, you would say what interesting writings can I produce as a result of all of this thing I've put together? If you ask yourself that question, your subconscious will produce a bunch of possible things for it. And then what you will need to do at various times, you might need to go and you might need to do kind of a fetch operation of saying, okay, I've decided to write on this. I'm going to go look this up. So there would be some kind of, you know, going and looking up physical things. It also depends on your memory. So many times some people will have that in your mind. If you don't have that in your mind, it may be worthwhile to kind of look through all your notes and try to come up with a more concise on a single page. I'm a big fan of single page. So put everything that you think are valuable at a high level on a single page, and you can use that to kind of trigger kind of possible things that you can write about. So it's going to be Anne, Noel, and Sanjay. Anne, go ahead. Anne, you need to unmute yourself. Okay, I'm going to go to the next. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was wondering if this would vary at all if you know you're, say, heavily analytical rather than intuitive. You know, because of what I've done in the past and how it seems very analytical. So sometimes when I'm trying to write creatively now, it gets in my way.
Okay.
So
and we are having difficulty with your audio, but I think I understand your question. You're saying, what if you're too analytical? What do you do? How do you get your intuition to work? That's your question, right?
yes.
Okay. So that's a very good question. The thing is that all of this, for example, if you see the questions at the end that I have 3 questions. So I'm going to read them out just to kind of provide kind of a more richer context for people who are asking questions. So first, when you look at your operation, are you stronger in the intuitive or analytical faculties? See, we differ quite a bit from person to person. And you really need to know how you're operating in order to kind of, you know, fine tune how you can produce more. Can you easily switch between analytical and intuitive faculties? To what extent are you too analytical? What can you do to let your creative juices flow more freely? To what extent do you not analyze enough? There are people who have exactly the opposite issue. Okay, so that's it's absolutely a very good question. So first step is to kind of identify yourself, you know, where you are. So for example, if you say, okay, look, I'm too analytical, right? Then you have to kind of watch out for that. So when you come to the intuitive step, maybe give yourself a little bit more time, be a little bit more patient. You can use tools like, for example, I find just almost stream of consciousness writing is a good way for somebody who's, because it's all about, and I think mostly what happens is that most analytical people are too judgmental about themselves as they are doing things. And that is what really stops most of the people. So you kind of have to do that. And again, kind of going back to Ray Dalio, there is a shortcut. When you realize that you're weak at something, for example, you deal with people who are strong at that. So you kind of start interacting a lot more with the person. So you can pick up some tips from them. You can learn a little bit from them, or you can get them involved in your project. You can say, analytically, I have this. If you wanted to kind of put some flares on it, how would you do it? So you can actually work together with multiple people to compensate for the weaknesses that you may have. So it's going to be Noel followed by Sanjay. Noel, go ahead.
Shrikant, thank you for laying that out. It's very very thoughtful, and I think it applies really well on nonfiction things particularly. I'm a professional writer. I trained as a journalist. I've done some nonfiction as well. And I've studied with a woman called Natalie Goldberg, who's a Zen Buddhist, who's, I met her in Minneapolis, but I think she works out of Taos, New Mexico now. And she would argue exactly the opposite, particularly for creative writing, memoir writing, that kind of thing. Start with the intuitive, whatever bubbles up. And then, and she argues the as you were saying, critical and the analytical versus the intuitive. She calls it the writer versus the editor. So just let something bubble up. Don't even think a lot about what it is, especially if you're doing memoir and things like that, or creative pieces, because as soon as you start thinking from the editorial or the analytical piece, you'll probably shut yourself down. But she'd argue that you start from the intuitive and then you apply the analytical. Now, as a journalist, I probably start from the analytical, much as you've laid it out, and I've had to switch brain functions in order to be able to do the other kind of writing.
Right. I mean, it very much depends on the purpose. So, for example, if you're writing a memoir, I mean, the starting point is still analytical, which is saying, I'm going to write a memoir. That's all. And then you're trying to put things down on the paper. And you might need, for a memoir, you might need a little bit less structured. So it's like, depending on the kind of what you're writing, the scale of these things and the steps, the frequency will vary. The scale at which you need to shuttle will vary, you know, how much you need to vary. Suppose you're writing a book, it will be one way. If you're writing a short paragraph, it will be another way. If you're writing something in the middle, it will be another way. If it is kind of a memoir which you're writing, or just you're trying to kind of, okay, well, what do I feel about this? If you're just writing something for yourself on that, that's one way. If you're writing a really important business letter, it would be another way. But what I'm saying is that this is like a general pattern, that the general pattern would still apply. The extent of which it will vary from, you know, from task to task. So that's why I find this to be extremely flexible tool. And you need to know, firstly, you need to know yourself, to know what your kind of tendencies are. You're going to make mistake in this direction. You have to be watchful about that. And secondly, you have to know you know, given the challenges of the particular task you're facing, where, to what extent, and to what, you know, how do you do the proportions between them and the shuttling between them? Thank you, Noel. Great question. Next one is going to be Sanjay, Deborah. Sanjay and Deborah. Sanjay, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a wonderful conversation and a method. I didn't realize this, but I've been using several of these methods for many years. But you've brought a lot of focus and sharp delineation to this. So this is an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
So what I've found is that sometimes after I've done this, especially after the initial portion, after I've written down the ideas that I want to consider on paper, I find that the motivation that I had, the internal drive, it goes away. And it's almost kind of like what happens with journaling. You know, this is a form of journaling. It's not meant for that, but you know, the same thing that happens with journaling, we're writing to process and you know, deal with complicated ideas and emotions. That tends to happen sometimes. So, I mean, one thing that and I was thinking about, you know, how do I deal with that when that happens? And what I've done in the past is that I'll take a break. I'll let go of it. I'll, you know, not think about it for a few days, and then I'll come back. And what I found is that when we're not thinking about something actively, our brain continues processing in the background, and that oftentimes will refresh or develop new insights about that idea. So I find it very, very, very interesting. I just want to make a quick second point on what Noel brought up regarding creative writing. I think this can be used for creative writing. I do use it for writing poems and you know, short stories, things like that. So I think you can switch the order, but depending on the type of writing, type of creative writing, you actually may want to still use the analytical step one. And just to give an example is that, like, if I'm writing a poem, my first analytical step will usually be choosing a single word or maybe one or two words that I want to be the theme of the poem, and that's really an analytical process. Other times when I don't want to do that, when I don't want to constrain myself with an idea for the poem, I might skip that step and just start with intuitive directly.
Thank you.
And what I found out of this, one of the powerful things that I found out of this is this really gives us a direct path into our subconscious, because
Yes.
I've written stories, short stories where I didn't realize it much until much later, but some of the things that I wrote about or some of the characters that I wrote about, I was not aware of, but my subconscious was aware of it. And so when I read the same thing months later, I realized that I had known things about people in my lives or circumstances, and I had written exactly the way that they turned out. So
Yep.
it's an amazing technique.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay. I mean, I would say a couple of things. So, firstly, I think that distance is important. I mean, I think let me start with the point that you ended with. Um, our unconscious is very large, or unconscious or subconscious, whatever you want to call it. It's huge, and that's where most of a lot of our connections are. You know, just like world is very large, our brains are very large, and the amount of experience that we have, amount of connections that we have had, which is not in focal awareness at a given time, is humongous. And so one of the things that this method is trying to do is to leverage that. And having, for example, the time, how much time that you spend being away from what you're producing is critical. So it's like kind of working in small glances. So for example, I find certain problems, it's much more easier to kind of do a focused work and then go away. And then you come back and you see something new. And that going away it could be at a scale of, let's say, if you're working on something really important and you get really stuck, you might let it go. And maybe 2 months down the road, you come back and you see something completely different. You see the problem because you're still making, your brain is still making connections based on that. At the same time, I want to emphasize that it's important to do as good an analytical job as you possibly can, even given the limits that it has, because the more you do that, more you make things clearer, more you make things explicit, you're giving your unconscious or subconscious more to work with. And it is going to produce more results even over time because you put some things more clearly in explicit terms. So there is a win-win interaction between the conscious and the unconscious. So it's going to be Françoise and Deborah next. Françoise, go ahead.
You've already answered part of the question I have about fiction and nonfiction, because it seems perfect for a small piece of work. But when it comes to memoir and a big book, I see it very difficult to be so strict. Even if we have flexibility, the portion and on a large piece of work, I'm not sure it's so easy to follow those steps in the order you present them.
Right. That's a good point. So the question is, how does it apply to a larger piece of work? This is most directly applicable to a smaller piece of work.
Okay.
But the beautiful thing is that larger piece of work is consisting of smaller pieces of work. If you can't do this, you can't do a larger piece anyway. Okay, you can't write at all if you can't do this well. So it's like a core skill of being able to write itself. Now, what happens is that when it comes to larger pieces, it is the iterations can be very long. Like, for example, what should the book be? Okay, like if you're saying I'm going to write this book, like for example, I'm producing a book now, right? This is like the first chapter of a book, 52 living ideas. So this is one of the 52 ideas. So, and I'm working on the book. So this is not a problem which is new to me. This is a problem I'm working on, right? So what I'm doing is that you're working at multiple levels at the same time. And the same kind of, the shuttling remains the same, but the shape of it becomes much more complex. Like, for example, you may be like, for example, I'm working on this idea, okay, very clearly. But then I'm saying, okay, oh, how many ideas remain? Okay, I already have a theme very well worked out. I have about maybe 12 to 15 ideas, which I know that I can just write off. I can write very, very quickly, and I can do meetups like this very quickly on. But rest of the ideas, I say, well, I would like to do this, but I don't know how to communicate that in 2 pages of materials and 2 pages of material and within a single meetup too, so that people can actually use it. So you have to, so it requires a much more kind of complex back and forth to make that happen. Next one is Deborah. Deborah, go ahead.
Thank you. That was a perfect segue. Once again, sometimes I find I'm writing something at the same time you're saying it because you're like in my head. So I want to say that I really, really love this, and it's very timely because it's been one of my goals this summer to work on writing. And my question I had written in the chat was about the messiness of writing. And so when we think of our brain, it's like a goldfish in a bowl. All these ideas are swimming around. And so when you talk about having bullet points, you talk about stream of consciousness. What do you think about just, just spitting the ideas out, which I've done before, and then you just look at it, kind of using you've already used your intuition. Now you need to look at it analytically and say, what are the 3 main themes of this stream of consciousness that I've spit out onto this page? And so there's kind of a magic rule of 3. You might be making 3 reasons to support an argument, 3 points you want to make, that sort of thing. So what do you think about that process?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the messiness is part of the creative process. It is going to look messy. It is going to produce a lot more and much more richer fabric of production than will end up in the final product. And so it may, I want to make sure I understand. So what you're saying is that, like, when you do stream of consciousness, it's going to be messy, and then you go back and look at, what are the 3 things that it is saying. So it's exactly the same kind of process I'm talking about, that, you should let that stream of consciousness run, produce whatever it can. It is going to be messy, and that's not a problem. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah, I guess I mean starting with that as step 1 instead of step 2.
Well, it depends. Like, the way I see the step 1 is simply purpose. Like, so most of the times you're producing this stream of consciousness related to something. If you know what it is about, but there are contexts, like you're saying, okay, I'm not feeling well, what's going on? And then you're producing a stream of consciousness. Again, that is the purpose, is saying, okay, I want to figure out what's going on. Something like that. So there is an implicit purpose, I would say. And that's what I would call the analytical part. So it can be very short, but it's something that is guiding what is being produced. So that's how I think about it.
Okay, well, we agree.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so now what I'm going to do is we are going to actually implement this. So folks, please get your writing pen and paper, or you can use a computer or something to write on, okay? And we're going to actually try to do this. So it's about 3:21. All right. So I want you to actually do, attempt to do some writing. All right. So first one, let me think here. Are you folks up for this? I mean, this is going to be good, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes of hard trying to do this. Just say yes if you in the chat, if you're up to it. Okay, so Marina, if you're not interested, then I would, you can listen if you want, but don't disturb anybody else with any chat or voice. Okay, you can listen. So I'm now going into complete kind of implementation phase. All right. Okay, so there are several people who are willing to give it a try, because I want you to actually see what it looks like, what this process looks like. Okay, That's the only way to actually apply it. All right. So first we are going to talk about the first 4 steps. See, first 4 steps are a unit. They are all about saying, okay, what are you going to write about? Okay. So choose a question, choose a writing project. It could be a blog, it could be anything, something that you want to write about, some open-ended question about the kind of topic that you would like to write about. You could be writing about your values. You could be writing about the biggest problems you're facing. You could write about what book you should be reading or anything. So think of a problem. Okay, think of a problem. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. Okay. Write down all. So now we're following the second step. Okay. All of this is there in the meetup page. All of this is there. Okay. So Mike is writing a letter. So just write down what's your question. What's your answer to the first one? You can just put it in the chat. What are you planning to? Is it a blog post? What are my values? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, editorial, starting an online magazine. Wonderful, wonderful. So you can choose the goal to be as large or as small as possible. It doesn't matter. Of course, wonderful. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to give you 3 minutes. And in 3 minutes, write out in your own, don't put it in the chat, just write out on your own all the possible ideas. So the instruction is let your subconscious loose on this question, and it's going to now produce a whole host of ideas as possible things. So just go ahead and write it. I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. Go ahead. I'm starting now. We have about a minute left. All right, folks, we are done with time, so please wrap up. Now just type in the chat, how many different ideas did you come up with? Was it 1, 2, whatever number, just type a number of how many different possible things, possible subjects. 5, 11, 2, 14, 5. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful, about 12. All right, 8. Excellent, excellent. So, all right, so this is wonderful. All right, so now the next step, the third, now we are going to take a deep breath. It's important to kind of separate yourself now, because now you're trying to put on, yeah, bullet point counting is fine. What's that? Maybe four, give me a second. Okay. So this, now we are at step number 3, analytical step. Use certain standards to select between the post or between the numbers that you come up with. For example, which one would be something interesting to my audience? Which one can be written on in reasonable time? Using these analytical criteria, select a post. So now we are in the process of selecting. Okay, so you have to select one out of everything that you've written down, one to focus on. Do you think that this will be a difficult thing for you, or it looks fairly straightforward? So you can say easy or difficult. 3, okay. So just type in whether you think that selecting is going to be okay. So we got 1, okay, 1 is easy, 1 is difficult, some difficult, some easy. Okay, all right. So now if it is easy, then there is no problem. So if it is difficult, then you have to kind of rise one level up. You should ask yourself, what is the proper standard to evaluate these things? Okay, what should be my criteria? Okay, so so the question is, what criteria are you using? What criteria do you think you should use to narrow down? So you can type in what criteria you think you should use. So even if it's like just one single thing, you can say time it takes, most important thing, or whatever. What standards? Because in order to use your analytical faculty, you need to use some standards. So what standards? So purpose and audience, practical value of an idea. Okay. What else? What standards can you use to choose between these writing projects that you have put? Uniqueness, very good. Okay. Now I'm going to just give you, see, this is another part. I'm just going to give you a heads up on the next one, next idea that I'm going to do, which I'm actually using right now. It's called the Yoda Timer. It's quite amazing what we can do when we say that we have 5 minutes or 4 minutes to do something. And if you say, okay, I'm going to do my best in that much time. So even those people who think that it is difficult, so please, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Look through this. Think of all the criteria that you think you should use. You can see some of the ones that other people are using. Maybe those are applicable to you. And try to pick one. Try to pick one. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes to pick one topic to write on. And then we're going to actually write, do a very quick version of the writing project. All right, I'm starting the clock now. So try to choose one topic that you're going to be writing on. 1 minute more. All right, folks. So if it's okay with you, just go ahead and type in what you're going to write about, whatever it is that you have selected. If you don't want to do that, that's fine too. But just go ahead and do, what are we going to, what writing are you going to do? Okay, what values are here for? Okay. Anybody else? Needs of an individual versus needs of the greater good. Wow, that's great. Why I have been hesitant to use social media. Okay. Exogenous and endogenous strategies to manage stress effectively. Wow. One chapter in my memoir to be given to friends. Okay, excellent. How to be more patient with myself. When Brazil to go back to Turkey. Okay. Redefining adult-child relationship during the onset of dementia. Wow. All right, these are all amazing topics. Okay, so now we're going to importing dogs. Wonderful. All right. Okay, so now let's look at the remaining 4 steps. Okay. Now, see, I find that this process itself to be extremely useful, because what we did is that we kind of said, okay, this is what I want to do. Then we kind of mind our unconscious to produce a whole bunch of things, and then we picked something from it. Okay, so now there is like a kind of an emotional investment that we have. Now, so let's do step 4 before we go to the next one, and that is check how you feel about writing the post and see if it seems to generate enthusiasm. So if you guys, if there is I hope it's going to be yes for most of you, but if it is not, then pick another one to write at this point. Okay, I see at least one yes. Okay, very good. So this is a very quick check. Okay, this is like, it could be like a split second. They say, of course I want to write about it. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go to the next 4 steps. I want to review all the 4 steps first, and then we will actually do them. Okay, so step 5 is produce a bullet point structure of the post. So what we are going to do is that we're going to break down, in order to do this, you're going to ask, where should you begin? Where should you end? And what's the structure in the middle? Okay, try to keep structure as simple as possible. You don't have to spell everything out. If you have just like 4 bullet points or 3 bullet points or 6 bullet points, most important ones again are the ones in the beginning and the end. And the ones in the middle, just separate them out enough that you have a sense of a structure. Okay. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And then we're going to write freely on the bullet points. So let's talk about the points about bullet points. I want to open it up for questions for a moment. Does anybody have any questions about how do you produce bullet points? Any questions about, going from a topic, this is what I'm going to write, to the step of producing bullet points? Any questions on that? If you have any questions, you can type in exclamation mark, or you can raise your hand. If not, I'm going to give it only about 10-15 seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead with it. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is that we're going to spend Now what you're trying to do is that you're trying to come up with a structure for your piece, okay? You're trying to say, where should it begin, where should it end, and what's in the middle. In what's in the middle, you can divide it maybe into 3 steps or something like that, some structure over there. Don't go overboard. If you make a structure which is 50 points, that's like having no structure. Okay, so it can't be more than 10 points. Ideally, and it can't be fewer than 3 points. So it's somewhere between 3 to 10. That's the approximate range, okay? So go ahead now. I'm going to give you 3 minutes and try your best to say, okay, where will you begin? Where will you end? If you get that, you've gotten half the marks, half the things right. And then remaining, or probably even 80% maybe. And then try to say, okay, what needs to be in the middle, and divide that between 1 to maybe 5 points, something like that. Okay. All right. I'm starting the alarm now for 3 minutes. Okay, folks, time is up. All right. So what I want to do now is, so firstly, what we have now is like a writing plan of saying, okay, these are the bullet points. So now the one crucial question that you have to ask at this point is that, is this enough for you to start writing? If it's a short piece, like 1 level bullet points are enough. Suppose you're writing a book, maybe generally 1 level bullet points is not enough. You need like 2-level bullet points, or sometimes even 3-level if it is a whole book. If it's an essay, maybe it's, so you kind of have to judge whether, suppose you say, okay, this is how I'm going to begin. Will you be able to just go ahead and write it out? So tell me whether you think, just look at the bullet points that you have and let me know if you can do the step 6. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're trying to judge whether the bullet point structures that you have produced is enough for you to start writing. Like, for example, if you look at the bullet point, a bullet point, and say, I have no idea what I'll, I need to kind of divide this further because this is just too large or something like that. So do you think that you have bullet points that you can actually start writing on? So just say yes or no. Okay. Yes. Very good. Very good. 3 yeses. Okay. Very good. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Okay. So here is what I'm going to do is, at this point, I want to take a break. And because actual process of writing will vary, because I've noticed that the pieces that you folks have vary actually in size dramatically. Okay, it could be from a paragraph to like 10 pages. Okay, so here is what I'm going to do. We're going to do breakout rooms, and we're going to discuss. Keep this with you. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Firstly, we're going to go into the breakout rooms and answer those 3 questions. Okay, the breakout rooms have to be very focused. I will assign different moderators in each of the breakout rooms. And what you're doing is that you are having people raise these questions and talk about these questions. So first question is that when you look at your operation, are you stronger in the intuitive or analytical faculty? So that's, where are you? Are you more analytical, more intuitive? Can you switch between them? So that's the first question. The second question, to the extent that you're too analytical, what can you do to use your intuitive faculty? And to the extent to which you are too intuitive, what can you use to use your analytical faculty? Okay, what can you do? And the third question of how can you use on various areas, let's not do that. Just those 2. So just evaluate yourself in terms of analytical and intuitive, and ask yourself, what would you do if you wanted to use the other faculty? And once we have done that, we will come back and we will share our takeaways. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to ask you to write, to follow the next steps. So follow actual writing, so which is going to be 6, 7, and 8, to do it between now and next Sunday. And next Sunday, I will start this kind of the recap of this meetup at 1:30. So 1 hour before the regular meetup, from 1:30 to 2:30, we will go through your experience of actually using this method. Remember that what you're doing is that you're going to first write it. So that's step number 6. Then you're going to look at it. You're going to take a break. Then you're going to come back and look at it as if somebody else has written it. Use all the standards that you should apply to it. Is it clear? Is it objective? Is it tight? Is it logical? Okay. Use those standards or whatever other standards you think you should use. Rewrite it, then keep it aside, then come back to it and do an intuitive pass on it to make it flow better. Again, come back as many times as you need. Maybe you will just need 1 iteration. Maybe if it's a complex piece, you will need 5. I don't know. That depends on the piece and depends on when you think that it is good enough. Okay. So do all of that, and let's talk about it next next Sunday at 1:30. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. That's the plan. But now I want you to evaluate where your problem may lie. So evaluate yourself honestly. Just talk amongst yourself to say, okay, am I strong on analytical or intuitive? And if I'm strong on one, what can I do? Now, the interesting thing is of doing this with other people is that they are going to be probably at various stages of this. They're going to be strong and where you're weak, and maybe you will learn something from each other. Okay, so I'm starting the groups for about 25 minutes, and then we will come back here. Okay, I'm opening the rooms now.